You check the account, and something inside you cracked, not because the number was low, but because a voice said, "You should have known." The money is gone, but that voice stays. It follows you into rooms. It sits beside you at dinner tables. It wakes up before you do. And here is what no one tells you. The debt is not the wound. The wound is what you now believe about yourself. This video is about that wound. Stay. There are two distinct events that happen when money is lost. The first is mathematical, transactional, cold. A number that was there is no longer there. The second event is psychological, and it is the one that destroys people. Because the moment the number changes, the mind does something ancient, something primal. It does not simply register a loss. It searches for someone to blame. And almost always, it finds you. Neuroscientists studying financial loss have observed something striking. The same neural circuits that process physical pain activate when people experience financial humiliation. The same regions, the same intensity. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry. The embarrassment of financial mistake registers in your brain the same way a broken bone registers in your body. And yet, we tell people it is weakness to feel it. We say, it is just money. Move on. But there is no just about it. Because money, in the architecture of the modern mind, is not a neutral tool. It is proof of competence, of worth, of intelligence, of your right to be taken seriously. And when it disappears, what disappears with it is the story you were telling about yourself. Shame has a terrifying quality that distinguishes it from almost every other human emotion. It feeds on silence. It grows in the dark. Most painful emotions, grief, anger, fear, they move through us if we allow them to. They have a natural arc, a beginning, a middle, an end. Shame is different. Shame stops the arc. It refuses to move through. Instead, it folds back on itself, recursively, endlessly. And nowhere is this more devastating than in the domain of money. Here is how the spiral works. First, the loss happens. A bad investment, a failed business, a debt accumulated in moments of desperation or hope. Second, the mind creates a story. Not, I made a mistake, but I am the mistake. This is a pivot point. The exact moment where ordinary financial setback transforms into something corrosive. Third, and this is where the spiral becomes truly dangerous. The shame creates behaviors designed to hide the shame. You avoid financial conversations. You stop opening mail. You don't tell your partner. You deflect questions with practiced vagueness. You perform confidence you do not feel. And every act of concealment adds a new layer to the spiral. Because now you are not just ashamed of what you lost. You are ashamed of hiding it. The wound has a wound. Fourth, isolation sets in. Because shame, unlike guilt, is fundamentally about exposure. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am wrong. And if anyone truly sees me, they will know. So the spiral's final mechanism is withdrawal from the people who might help, from the resources that might repair, from the light. To understand why financial loss triggers shame rather than simply problem solving, we must understand how deeply money has been written into the definition of human worth. This is not a modern invention. Aristotle observed that in a commercial society, a man's financial standing determines his access to political voice, social recognition, and the very categories of respect. In medieval Europe, debt was not merely financial, it was moral. A debtor was a sinner. A man who could not pay had broken a sacred covenant. And while the religious language has faded, the neural encoding has not. Modern psychology has documented what is called a money self-fusion, the degree to which a person's financial status becomes structurally integrated into their self-concept. For many men, particularly those raised in cultures of performance and provision, the fusion is total. They do not have money problems. They are the money problem. This is why a man can lose his health and speak about it openly. He can share that he had surgery, that his body failed temporarily. He speaks of it in waiting rooms, at dinners, without particular shame. But let the same man lose his savings in a failed venture, and he will carry that secret to the grave. He will revise the story. He will say it was timing. He will say The market was unpredictable. He will say anything except, I was wrong. I trusted wrongly. I lost. Because to say I lost is for the shame-fused man to say, I am a loser. And that sentence, that single-syllable distinction, is the architecture of the entire shame spiral. When money becomes a proxy for worth, and loss becomes the proof of worthlessness, financial shame is no longer about finances. It is existential. It attacks the very foundation of who you believe yourself to be. We have been speaking of shame as an emotional experience, but shame has measurable, material consequences that extend far beyond how a person feels. The first hidden cost of financial shame is relational. The man in a shame spiral does not simply withdraw from his accounts. He withdraws from his relationships. He becomes less present, less available, less honest. He protects the secret by creating distance. And in protecting the secret, he sacrifices the intimacy that might have healed him. Research on couples and financial disclosure shows that financial secrecy, independent of the actual financial situation, is among the strongest predictors of relationship deterioration. The amount lost matters less than whether it was shared. The second hidden cost is physiological. Chronic shame activates the body's stress response. Cortisol, inflammation, disrupted sleep, suppressed immune function. The man carrying financial shame in silence is not simply uncomfortable. He is physiologically compromised. His body is running a continuous threat response to a danger that exists in its most destructive form, only in his interpretation of himself. The third hidden cost, perhaps the most devastating, is what psychologists call risk paralysis. The man who has been burned by financial shame does not simply become more cautious. He becomes frozen. He will not invest again. He will not start the next venture. He will not open the next conversation. The shame of the past loss becomes a ceiling of the future, not the actual loss. That is simply mathematics. The shame, the fear of feeling a fool again. And this is the most precise and brutal irony of the shame spiral. The wound created by one financial mistake guarantees future financial diminishment by preventing the very engagement, risk, and honest conversation that would allow financial recovery. Shame does not just wound you. It kneels on the wound to prevent it healing. The Stoics did not shy from the reality of loss. In fact, they built their entire philosophy of resilience on its expectation. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, emperor of Rome, spent his private journals examining failure, not celebrating success. Failure, the gap between what he wished to be and what he feared he was. Epictetus, born into slavery, who had every material thing stripped from him, taught that the only thing shameful is confusing what you control with what you do not. You do not control markets. You do not control the decisions of those you trusted. You do not control timing or fortune or the 10,000 variables that converge to create financial loss. You control only your judgment, your effort, your response. To feel shame for what is outside your control is to misidentify the boundary of the self. Most people confuse two fundamentally different things. They confuse the loss, which was partly or largely outside their control, with the response to the loss, which is entirely within it. Shame insists you should have prevented the loss. Wisdom asks, what will you do with the loss that has occurred? Seneca wrote, all things are foreign to us. Only time is ours. The money was always, in some philosophical sense, on loan. Every asset you have accumulated exists within a network of permission, of stability, of system, of other people's cooperation, and the world's continued functioning. When some of that network shifted, the money shifted with it. This is not your failure. This is the nature of things that are not ultimately yours. What is yours is this moment, this breath, this decision about what to believe about yourself. And that no market, no debt, no failed venture can take. There's a way through, not around, not under, not by waiting, through. The first principle of dissolution. Name what happened with the precision of a witness, not the brutality of a prosecutor. A witness says, this is what occurred. A prosecutor says, this is what you are. The shame spiral is a prosecutor. Recovery begins with firing the prosecutor and appointing the witness. In concrete terms, this means speak the number. Tell someone you trust what was lost, not be absolved, not be comforted, but because shame cannot survive accurate speech. Shame requires a distortion of silence. When you say out loud, I lost this amount in this investment for these reasons, the thing loses its power to define you. It becomes what it always was, an event, not an identity. The second principle, separate the decision from the person. Every financial decision is made in a specific context, with specific information, with specific emotional states, with whatever version of you existed at that moment. That version was not foolish. That version was doing its best with what it had. When you access information you didn't have at the time and use it to condemn the version of you that couldn't know, you are doing something categorically unjust. You are prosecuting a man for a crime that required knowing the future. The third principle is the hardest and the most important. Return to the arena, not immediately, not recklessly, but with the understanding that shame's most dangerous gift is the permission it gives you to never risk again. And a life without risk, without the possibility of loss, is a life lived in the spiral's most comfortable chamber, safe and small and slowly suffocating. The goal is not to forget. The goal is not to perform forgetting. The goal is not to tell the story in a way that makes you the hero of a loss you did not choose. The goal is something harder and more valuable than any of that. The goal is to carry the loss accurately, to know what it cost, to know what it taught, to know the specific texture of the fear that preceded it, and to use that knowledge not to avoid all risk, but to engage risk with the specific wisdom of someone who knows what loss actually feels like, not someone who has theorized about it, not someone who has read about it, but someone who has sat in the dark room with it, who has held the closed ledger, who has turned away from the door and then turned back, who has opened the window and climbed the stairs and stood in the morning. That person is not broken. That person is not a fool. That person carries something most people who have never lost cannot access: the earned knowledge of recovery. The debt was never the wound. The embarrassment was. And you have looked at it. You are looking at it. That is not weakness. That is the most difficult form of courage available to a human being. The witness has taken the stand. The prosecutor has been dismissed. The trial of the self is over. Go build something.